Alrighty, it is Monday, May 26th. I'm here with my friend, as always, Mr. Chase Murray. Um, a lot happened last week. A lot. We saw Donald Trump go and push back against the South African president regarding a white genocide, which was insane. We saw the big, beautiful bill being passed in the House, which I think is very odd to me when you have to go into the middle of the night in order to pass a bill. I think that just goes to show like how much opposition there is to that. And also, I think that it brings a big issue of age because the only reason that they were able to pass that bill was because three members of the Democratic Party passed away within the past couple months. And so they were in, we haven't been able to hold elections for those positions. So they were able to pass that bill with the majority, which um, is another conversation that we can have today or later. I think that's important. Maybe even talking about age limits, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the big beautiful bill? Do you think that it passes the Senate? Obviously, Trump himself wants it to be passed. Do you think that he has enough political power in order to get it passed in the House with a simple majority and budget reconciliation?
I mean, it seems like as of right now, no. I mean, who knows exactly what happens with it really? Because I think Trump can always push and kind of get his way, and I think they'll probably just make changes to it that are so small or so insignificant that people would just agree to it anyways. Um, Now, I mean, we'll see what they do, but I doubt that they're just going to let him not take this win. Which we'll see if it's actually a win once those cuts and things, and just a gift to wealthy people and the bill as well. And see how that does for the 2026 and how well it's received because both sides are kind of playing this as their I guess opening towards 2026. Republicans almost framing it as like we're getting the job done, and the Democrats, framing it as uh, Medicaid cuts and Medicare and just different cuts on that department. Um, as well as, I mean, it's not gonna solve the things that they are saying that they care so much about. They scream about the debt and how it's gonna be the end of America because of the debt, but then they're like, oh, actually, we're just going to add on a couple more.
Yeah, I mean, without any real cuts to some of these entitlement programs, I mean, how are they even going to fund this? Like, we are deficit spending out of our mind already, and all this is going to do is add to the debt. I think it's very fascinating because, Donald Trump talked about making things cheaper and less expensive and cutting the budget so that we get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And then in order to actually be able to afford things. And now all of a sudden he wants to pass a bill that is going to only increase the debt by, trillions of dollars without doing any meaningful cuts
Yeah.
that could actually help to substantiate this. I think it is also fascinating because I was like, I want to say that I saw some random economists write an article saying like that with this bill passed as is, without any other cuts to any programs or anything like that, we would default by like 2026. And that right there sounds very scary to me because why are we so recklessly able to pass a bill in the House and have it come as close as it is right now? Because I mean, like I said, the Senate, I mean, I've seen some pushback from, the usual suspects, but also a one-off in MAGA star Josh Hawley even saying like he wouldn't pass the bill as is because he wouldn't want to touch Medicare or Medicaid in order to get this bill passed. So I think it is very interesting to see how they maneuver around this and where they do the cuts because I mean the reality is the only place to do real cuts would be Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, arguably, I think they're already kind of doing those things. Um, you know, they'll act like we're not going to cut it, we're not going to cut it. You know, they were saying that for a long time before this period, and it's like, no, you're clearly going to cut it because that's in the bill. And I also think, it's kind of not just with the bill, but you see this across the administration as a whole. One second the argument is we're not trying to spend any money, we're trying to save America from this debt, we're trying to pay back all of it. And in the next second, he's talking about how he's going to fund his, I guess, $1 billion golden dome over America
Hmm.
because apparently we have missiles flying into America. Um, which knowing
Right.
Trump, that might be, I got to look out for that in the future because, making everybody dislike us.
Right.
But I mean, I think it just goes to show you that budget concerns, and this is honestly universally true in some ways, it seems, especially over the past 20 years or so. Um, it's only a complaint when the other off when the other side is in office, right? It's uh screaming about how the debt is going to destroy us, and then Trump becomes president, and it's like more debt, let's do it. And they still vote on these things.
I
And as
mean,
much,
it literally increases the debt by $4 trillion, the debt ceiling by $4 trillion.
yeah, which I mean, I think the whole entire debt ceiling in general is a little like why is there a limit? You should not have a limit for what the government can, you know, borrow and things like that. And like obviously that there is a limit economics wise, but we sit here, we renegotiate every so often up. The budget's going to have to increase.
Yeah.
As time goes on, you're going to have to increase it to pay for more things
Right.
because we have a
Inflation.
yeah, and beyond that, we're just also, I mean, they constantly have more things to fund.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's like you got to figure those things out. But um, I was seeing online recently, I think it was a tweet or something about, how Bill Clinton, it's a picture from the 90s where he's saying we're going to be debt free by, I want to say it was like 2013 or something. I'm not sure. But it is interesting how, we were kind of on a glide path to being able to resolve our debt issues. But, you know, uh, when you go to war and you spend millions and millions of dollars, on those war efforts. Especially like looking at the what we spent in like Iraq and Afghanistan and things like that. But even in some ways, looking at like just the overall things we allocate with the budget, um, it never seems to be as concerned. That they mention the future, but then they don't actually do anything to protect it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton was the last president that we actually had a surplus with.
mhm.
And it's very fascinating to see also, Trump to try to pass this bill when we saw what happened his last term, which was continuous deficit spending, even with a booming economy. The S&P 500 was hitting new time highs ever since 2013. We have seen, our budget continue to grow. We've seen our economy continue to grow. We saw inflation being held around the 2% benchmark. And it's just crazy to me that Republicans continue to vote in presidents when the reality is every time a Republican president comes into office within the past like 30 years, Democrats have had to come and clean up the mess. We look at George W. Bush in the housing crisis, and then we look at Donald Trump and COVID, and then Biden has to come up and clean up his mess, and then people are blaming all of the inflation on him when the reality is like, we had to deficit spend in order to get ourselves out of that very difficult time. And it's just frustrating to me to see like we continue to have Republican presidents come and screw up or alter what Democrats do, Democrats have to come in and save the economy, and then all of a sudden we just go through that rinse and repeat of, oh man, we're miserable for some odd reason, so now we have to vote in a Republican again. And I don't know. I think it's just very frustrating to see, and I just don't. I literally don't understand that the average voter's mindset when it comes to that because like, why are we? Why are we going and voting in people when we know that they're bad for the economy? I mean, not Donald Trump, sorry, Elon Musk posted on Twitter a couple months ago that they need to start cutting the Federal Reserve because over 80% of the Federal Reserve votes Democrat. Why do you think the Federal Reserve votes Democrat? Those are economists. Why? Like I just that that right there shows to me that most people aren't actually voting based off their bank account. They're voting based off of what they hear. And Donald Trump is the master at messaging. I hate to say it. I hate to admit that, but that man is one of the best at messaging because he just sounds so stupid, but he's able to use words people are able to comprehend and understand. And people like Biden, people like Kamala, people like Hillary lay out the facts, they lay out the statistics, they lay out, a detailed, comprehensive understanding of the economy, and that loses people because people are right now we're in a generation of instant gratification, and we see Donald Trump. I mean, he literally just got a bill passed in the House called the Big Beautiful Bill. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like why are we voting in presidents that have the vocabulary of a 10th grader. And that's being generous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's smart in some ways, but I also think it's a mixed bag because um a lot of times with Trump, he's saying those things because, well, one, he's not that smart, but for two, he thinks everyone else is absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
Like he does not have any respect for the people he goes out and, talks to. Um, like what people offer you in a conversation when they're out on if they're talking about stories and not talking about your actual lived life, just sitting there rambling, which he tends to do. I mean, look at him at what I forgot the university this weekend. He went to a university and it's just every single time he goes to these
West
speeches,
Point.
yeah. I think it was that one and then maybe there was two. I'm not sure, but he was mentioning it and every single speech he does at those places are not the typical inspirational, nonpartisan, let's put politics aside for a moment type messaging. It's almost always like just crazy stories and talking about how great he is and how he won and how you'd be stupid if, you didn't think he won, yada, yada, yada. All these different things, just, a stump speech basically continually. Um, and I think people who are his base, they'll eat that up. But at what point is he actually doing anything for you? He's not talking about how you're going to be paying more at the grocery store. He's not talking about how you're struggling to make ends meet. He's not talking about any of your issues. And I think with Trump, people feel like they're getting offered something when so often they're getting offered scraps from him
Yeah.
doesn't care about your issues because one, he's not like you. He's not gonna face those issues. And even beyond that, he's just gonna say, tough it up. Like I mean, his entire approach, I remember I think it was this weekend or into last week, a reporter was asking him, who's gonna eat or do you think the companies are gonna eat the tariffs? And he was like, sometimes it'll be the company, sometimes it'll be the country, who will eat it. Do people not realize he means you? He
Yeah.
means when you go to the grocery store, you're going to eat it. When you go buy a new car, you're going to eat it. And he expects you to eat it because what's it to him? I mean, how much is a banana to him? Like he
Yeah.
has no concept.
Or $2 instead of 30. Like that right
Yeah.
there just that kills me. And you're right about, it's very odd because like Republicans have been the party of like, oh, we're anti-price control because that's anti-capitalism and that affects consumerism. But, as soon as the tariffs are implemented, he's telling, after Walmart made an announcement that they might have to start increasing prices due to
Mhm.
tariffs, he tells them to eat the prices. If that is not price control, I don't know what is. And that's just, I don't know. The party that is just so pro capitalism and so pro free market, whenever Donald Trump says something, they have to find some way to navigate a way around what he said to make it seem like he's still holding conservative principles. And he's just not, like, plain and
No, but
simple.
that's the thing. There's no real conservative party in the country anymore. And that's what people don't get. Donald, like, which in some ways to me, not being a conservative, I'm like, hey, that's actually the messaging is getting through. Like, we're actually, because socially, yeah, there might be some people who are a little bit more conservative and things like that. Especially, I think socially it goes through changes every single like so often. People are like, I'm actually tired of gay people. I'm tired of these people. Like, I'm tired of these people. Like, we're done. And then it's like, they're okay. I'll make friends with them for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, it's back and forth. But, you know, as for anything else,
That's so true. I can't. It's so funny that you said that because I'm remembering a meme. There's like this It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where they say like he's like I play both sides so that I always come out on top. And Chick-fil-A came out as being like pro LGBTQ, even
mhm.
though they continue to donate to like companies that help with conversion therapy and things like that. So I think it's hilarious that you brought that up. Like we're so wishy-washy and we flip-flop so much in terms of like, yeah, are we gonna like gay people now or are we anti-gay people? Are we pro black people or are we gonna go ahead and say that, slavery wasn't that bad and it helped us to have like workforce development programs? Like it's just so crazy how we do this flip whenever there's like a new president because like as soon as Donald Trump comes into office, now all of a sudden we want to start rolling back DEI programs. But when Biden was in office, we wanted to start rolling them out. Um, I think it's just, when Biden was in office, we were pro-immigration. Now that
Mhm.
Donald Trump's in office, we are anti-immigration. And like you start to see companies start moving a certain way in order to appease a certain political party when they're in power.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because, like for example, with Target, there was a big push and boycott towards them, and a kind of criticism of them for rolling back their DEI programs. Now they ended up really just changing it and naming it something different and still including it because despite what Trump and everyone, tries to say, America's just getting more diverse, and it's kind of it's this weird combination of getting more diverse, getting tired of the diversity, but also embracing it in some ways because you have to
Yeah,
compete as a business in America. You have to expand to not just one specific group. You have to kind of deliver to multiple different types of people,
yeah,
uh, and I think uh, that trajectory is not going to stop. There's nothing that any president, either way, any party could do about it. That's just how the world is kind of going to go. And I think sometimes fighting it so much is a bit ridiculous, kind of with the anti-DEI. It's like the teacher in Idaho who had a poster that's everyone's welcome here, and it had people of different colors holding hands, and they were like, "That's a little divisive."
yeah.
Like, what do you mean it's divisive?
Right.
So basically, we're racist, is what you're
Yeah.
saying. Like, there's no other way to describe that because if you see a bunch of hands of different people in different races and you're like, nah, that's too much for me. That's too that might be offensive to some people. Okay, maybe they should be offended, like,
Yeah,
but
which
it just
that's
goes to show
scary.
you, yeah, it goes to show you though how the concept of inclusion for some people being included like, beyond just the normal stereotypical people, it's viewed as like something that people have to accept or something that people have to get over. And it's just so weird to me that like people frame it like that.
Yeah.
And then they want, when people respond to them and are like, "Are you racist? Like, what's up? Like, why do you not like DEI?" And they're like, "How dare you say that to me?" Like it's the type of people now who are sitting here screaming that, DEI discriminates against white men, and they're just sitting here raging about how they're oppressed as a white man in America. And I'm just like, what are we talking about? Because for years, for years, if any black person said anything about racism in America or anything like that, they'd be like, you're just too sensitive. You need to get over it. It's not that deep. All these different things. And now they're like screaming about how they're oppressed because they're the white man. And, I just think it's ridiculous that you have to compete a little bit more for your job or something. And now you're just, you know, anti-DEI because you're scared that it's going to affect your position or your, I guess, access to power, which, a person who is different than you trying to get by in their life is not a threat to you. And it really has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Um,
I actually have a friend, big MAGA guy, who was telling me like DEI was racist, and like I went and asked him, I was like, what part of DEI do you not like? Do you not like the diversity? Do you not like the equity? Or do you not like the inclusion? And he straight up said, he was like, I don't like the equity part. I think it should be equality. Everybody should have the same rights. And like that's just not how life works, though. He's like, but it's discrimination if we go with equity because of somebody's skin color, we're giving them certain advantages. And I'm like, well, they've been oppressed for years, right? Like, in order to most over 80% of people who get their jobs through connections. The way that our system has been set up, we haven't been able to actually actively get those positions because of connections within the community. We don't have those connections in the high places, in the right places. And he was just like, well, no, like regardless, it should be merit based. You should go based off. I'm like, you can't believe that if you look at Donald Trump's, cabinet picks and see someone like Pete Hegseth, the DUI hire, being
you know,
placed.
as much as people want to criticize those, I think the stranger one is WWE woman as the education
Oh,
secretary.
McMahon.
Yeah, like what part of wrestling and education goes together? Like, I feel like those are like, and then, just the things that are coming out of this administration are so utterly insane that it's like, this is not, you want to speak about merit. Somebody who has merit could not come up with these stupid ideas. Like, they couldn't. Like,
Yeah,
this is, but I also think it's never really been about merit, right? It's certain people always need to be respectful and say the right thing. It's kind of like I feel like it's patriotism, right? With white Americans, you almost always get this whole they're patriotic, you don't have to worry about them, all these different things. But when it comes to people of color who might say things that feel a little anti-American or feel like, maybe they're criticizing some aspect of America, people are like, well, you're not patriotic enough or you don't love this country enough. And it's like just pointing out issues and things like that doesn't negate, like, I feel like in some people's experiences, they just want to wash all those things away.
yeah,
And it's like you have to take that into consideration when you're thinking about how people live in this day and how people have access to, like we were talking about jobs or the right neighborhoods, things like that. And I think when that coincides with people forgetting history, those things repeat.
yeah,
Doesn't mean it's when people forget why there was a Holocaust or why people had these, said these things about Jews or why there was slavery and things like that. Like we didn't all start at the same place in the race, and you want to act like everybody should just be fine and go for it. Um, and I think to not acknowledge reality just doesn't do anybody any favors.
I agree. Um, as much as I want to continue with this conversation, I think we should maybe talk about the quote unquote white genocide. Um, Donald Trump decided to, I guess, ambush, which I feel like
Is
is
it an
very
ambush if you know it's coming? Like, I feel like everybody should have known that this is how Donald Trump is going to be in his meetings. You know what I'm saying? Like, why did you think it was going to be different when he already uh, asked the ambassador to leave, said we're going to, cancel our deals with South Africa? It's like it was coming. They knew it was coming, I feel like.
yeah.
It's a little after you have the whole Zelensky incident, nobody's super surprised.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know what the qualifying word would be because you're right. I don't think it's an ambush, but at the same time, it's just like no president would do
Yeah.
something like that other than Donald Trump. And so like you keep trying to hope that at some point he's going to resort to some kind of normalcy. Um, but then you often get disappointed because the reality is it's still Donald Trump who's in office. But I mean, what were your your feelings of him? I don't. Okay, you're right about the ambush thing. We knew it was coming. Did we know that he was going to put on a documentary for the president of South Africa so that he could watch about the quote unquote genocide that was happening in South Africa? Did you expect that? That's the real question.
I mean, no, but I mean, I expect him to say something. I do think it's interesting because let's say it is happening there, right? It's not clearly, but that's the only one you're going to care about. What about all the other places? Like, what about Gaza? Any compassion, any concern there? Nope,
Right.
just white people who are getting genocided. That's the only ones, oh, specifically South Africans. It's like, okay. So even if this was happening, it's weird how you're picking one particular group. Don't know why. But then, to sit there and confront them and be like, there's violence taking place in your country. Like, all these white people are getting hurt. It's like, okay, but the black people are getting killed too by the violence. Like, it's not like white people are more targeted by violence in South Africa.
Right.
And I'm gonna be honest, some of the people who are sitting there complaining those things are people who are just tired that it's not white dominated South Africa anymore. Like they can say that it's something different. And you look, I do think there's a transition and change for going from one system to another. I mean, it's been a little bit, so I figure we would have changed a little bit. But I think sometimes I mean, really any white apartheid state or any state that had unequal circumstances between racial groups or ethnic groups. Um, I mean, those things last for a long time.
Yeah.
And it can kind of just become very ingrained. But I do think it's just completely ignoring the facts of who actually is, best positioned and privileged, I guess, in South Africa to say. Um, and then also understanding, the dynamics of South African history up until this point and why they're looking at farmers' land if they're even, they're usually compensating people, but there's a concern for farmers' land because the vast majority of the population does not nearly have the same access.
Yeah.
Now, that aside, I do think it's also ridiculous to destroy your relationship with somebody who you're trying to, you know, kind of balance allyships with because they're I wouldn't say non-aligned. I think they're somewhat lean America because I mean they're one of our largest trading partners, and also one of the closest allies in Africa.
Yeah.
Also a similar government system to ours. Um, so it's like, destroying your relationships with allies for faults and, pretenses and just, the least of these. um, type situations is just interesting to me. But you know, that's his MO. He tends to do that.
Yeah, I thought it was very odd how he like introduced him and saying like, highly respected in some circles, but not so respected in others. And I was like, why would you say something like that? Like at that point, you kind of just like watching him and being like, man, I wish he had a teleprompter to at least guide him to sound not as stupid because he just sounds so uneducated. And I mean, granted, he is, right? And I think I think one thing that's difficult for me, and I'm sorry for going away from the topic really quickly, but I kind of have to point this out. I think one thing that's very difficult for me is that Donald Trump will never be seen as senile because he's always been an idiot. And people have always seen him struggle to find the right words or not give any detailed plans on anything. Whereas Biden would try too hard to give out stats and statistics, and so he was seen as senile because he couldn't remember everything perfectly. Whereas Donald Trump doesn't have to worry about that because he never gives any like quality responses. He's saying stupid things like we're going to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera, right? Like we're seeing things like Donald Trump, fighting with Zelensky in the middle of the White House. Like we've just, I think because of his inability to give any his inability to make proper sentences and have anything like seem remotely smart that he says, we're never going to see him as senile, which is just very frustrating to me because he clearly is.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I mean, the entire approach towards which I know you just got on the side tangent, but then that reminded me of something else. I am so tired of hearing about Joe Biden being old. It's not news. It's never been news. And then this whole it was covered up. How can it be covered up when the vast majority of the country thought the same thing?
Yeah, right.
You're not smarter because you're in the news and you thought Joe Biden was old. And like, look, you can go off with the conspiracy theories that you think he has dementia and all these different things, but if you're going to talk about this old white man having dementia, you need to talk about the other one having dementia
Right.
or something. And then even beyond that, I think it was so hilarious the entire time when they're saying, Biden just looks so tired and Trump just had so much energy. And it's like, yeah, I would have a lot of energy if I was just resting at my Mar-a-Lago resort for 4 years, not doing anything, just complaining on Twitter. Like, that's all you did. Of course, you're not as exhausted. Like, it's always funny to me because Trump can ramble about just whatever. And it's like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then Biden stumbles as he's trying to, he stumbles over one word in his speech about some specific topic that, despite it not going so well, if you actually watched Biden, you could kind of get some understanding of what he's saying.
Right.
Trump says so many different things, especially on the campaign trail, where he was saying so many different things that I was like, what is he talking about? What is this? But no one ever frames it like that.
I
I
know.
mean, it's like the Biden debate disaster. I think it was crazy because I mean, Trump was literally out there saying like, y'all are Palestinians as an insult and a slur, which, I mean, unfortunately, saying that in America, people were like, okay, like no reaction to like racism and cruelty.
Right.
But, I think just the double standards are crazy. But beyond that, I think it shows you something about how people respond to the way in which you deliver things,
Yeah.
right? Like it doesn't really matter always your character, your content, what you're trying to do. It can really just matter about the delivery. And I think sometimes it's relatable how Trump speaks, which
Yes.
is sad, but I think most people on some level it's like a bunch of fancy words, and even to a degree, people who sound like experts in things just get on people's nerves at this point. Um, I mean, and I do think that there is a degree of which, we could say that the experts don't know everything. And I think giving in to a little bit of like what Trump says, where he's like, I don't know, I don't know. Say you don't know sometimes because you don't.
Right.
And I think that's what, if you take anything away from how Trump speaks to people is it delivers a little bit better than you would think. Like especially with his base, going just kind of tying it back, the Zelensky confrontation and the confrontation with South Africa are actually very popular with the base because it's him working for the American people. It's him taking care of people who are taking advantage of us in their concept, of what's happening. Um, and that I think it lasts much longer than anything
Yeah.
with the.
Yeah. I know we're about to have to wrap it up in the next couple minutes, but I wanted to, also touch back on that double standard part that you just said because like this was another thing that kind of registered with me. How low of a bar do you have to have where it was newsworthy that Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he was praying for Joe Biden, and that was a big deal?
Mhm.
Like this stand that is such a low standard, and that kills me to think because the reality is that any other president would have done the same thing and not gotten any attention. But then as soon as he gets into a press conference and really starts talking about it, it's just like, okay, that clearly wasn't him that posted that. That was clearly somebody else that said, I'm going to take your Truth Social for just a couple hours. Let me post this. Don't post anything else with a follow up. And now Trump was talking about how he was like well, not only does he have stage 9 cancer, which isn't a thing, wild, but he has he the entire time he did have dementia, and he's not even mad at Biden anymore. He was just a senile old man. It was the people around him that were corrupt and that actually ruined our country. It wasn't Joe Biden that ruined our country. Now it was the people around him, which I don't I think that that's just it's wild to me to see how he just pivoted, and instead of just being respectful, he started to attack his doctors and attack him. And then you even see conservative pundits saying, like, how did Jill, or no, not even conservative pundits, JFK, or not JFK, sorry, Donald Trump Jr. said that, how did Joe Biden not catch this? For one, she's not a medical doctor. Two, you don't normally like when you do blood tests, you have to specify what you are doing in blood tests. There are very hundreds of variations for tests in order to catch certain things. Unless you test for those things, you're not going to find out. So like it's I hate that everybody has suddenly gotten their medical degree and has decided, oh, they should have caught this sooner.
Yeah, of course.
But
There.
anyways, wait, did you want to say something before we head off? Okay. I appreciate your time. Definitely a lot more that we could have talked about because there was just so much that happened last week. But we'll be back either sometime